Good afternoon, and welcome to all of our listeners today. This is our coronavirus market commentary update, and I'm joined here this afternoon remotely by our Chief Investment Officer, Aaron Tuttle, and we have titled this talk today, Weeks When Decades Happen. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you, John. I'm glad to be here.
Well, many of us are working from home, and since the safety and well-being of our team, clients, families is paramount, Aaron and I are in different locations, which means that there are 2 times the chance of something going wrong with internet connections and technology. So thank you for your patience if we happen to have a snafu. So lots has happened since our call last week, and the effects have become more and more real, which makes one's emotions more on edge. We learned actually that one of our clients and family has been infected with the virus, so they are certainly in our thoughts and prayers, and we wish them a speedy recovery. The government-imposed shutdown has certainly impacted all of our lives as restaurants, sporting events, entertainment venues, educational institutions, and more have shut down. And being home and restricted without being able to freely move about and socialize will take an emotional toll on all of us. Our advisors have been working tirelessly to answer your questions, address your concerns. So, the purpose of today's call is to update you on what's happening in the market, discuss what is relevant to our clients' portfolios, explain what we are doing about it, give you confidence that we will make it through this crisis, and gain back market values and more. Aaron, thanks for sharing your thoughts and observations today. So tell us.
Well, let's just jump right into the R word, recession. We saw strong economic data in both January and February. March data has looked much weaker, with the manufacturing PMI at 49.2 and the service PMI at 39.1. Readings below 50 indicate a slowdown. This should not be a surprise. Some are estimating as much as a 10% decline. For it to be a technical recession, we need 2 consecutive negative quarters. It is possible, but it will require both the first and the second to be negative. The third and fourth quarter will likely see acceleration so long as the restrictions are removed. We may not meet the technical definition, but we've certainly experienced a recession-like drop in the market. Jobless claims are expected to be as high as well. The restaurant industry is not only one of the hardest hit industries, but as an industry, it's the largest U.S. employer. Expect the number to be very big. Before we get into the next section, I want to remind everyone, we are not doctors, but we have certainly learned a lot. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners would agree. If you wanted to take a test on your knowledge of viral infections, 2020 is the year. In late January, the coronavirus was just making headlines, and we were asked if we believed it would have a significant impact on the markets. Our initial response was unlikely. Many may be asking, why did we not think this would have a major impact? Virus concerns have been very common, and whether a fluke or not, they coincide with election years. Measles, Ebola, Zika, MERS, swine flu, bird flu, SARS, these are just for this century. To see a comparable sell-off in the market, we have to go back to the Asian flu of 1957. The 1957 pandemic killed between 1 million and 2 million globally and killed 70,000 to 160,000 in the US. The population was 170 million at the time. This would be near 305,000 deaths today. The market sell-off was nicknamed the teddy bear. It is helpful to remember there is no one cause of a bear market. In 1957, the Civil Rights Bill was filibustered by Senator Storm Thurmond. The governor of Arkansas called out the National Guard of the United States to prevent African American students from enrolling in Little Rock Central High School. Civil Rights Act of 1957 was passed. President Eisenhower sent federal troops to Little Rock. Sputnik 1 was launched. There was also the Asian flu. The S&P bottomed on October 22nd, 1957 at 38.98. It was a V-shaped recovery. Bear markets always die with the birth of a bull market. The total bull market lasted for 4.1 years and peaked on December 12, 1961 at 72.64, up 86.35% from the bottom of the bear market. It's an annualized return of 16.23%. We do not believe most of the economic issues are coming from the virus. Just as much as the sell-off in 1957 was not due to the large death rate from Asian flu. The market sell-off is likely due to the government's reaction to the virus. Is the government action correct? Once again, we are not doctors, nor are we epidemiologists, though we have modeled the impact of the virus in several scenarios. It all depends on the goal. Thankfully, we are not required to make the decision on lockdown, but instead, how to manage the risk in portfolios and clients' financial plans. For us, our goal is client and performance focused. Our model is a probability weighted assessment. The government is using an abundance of caution assessment. With this in mind, they are focused on the worst case scenarios. When we are building our models for the virus, we are using Farr's law for modeling the disease. The law states that epidemics tend to rise and fall in roughly symmetrical patterns and can be approximated by a normal bell-shaped curve. It is a simple model, but has proved very accurate when estimating number of deaths. Farr's law has shown itself useful in several previous epidemics, including AIDS, HIV, Ebola, and SARS. Part of what makes it successful in epidemic forecasting is that it does not rely on complex polynomial regressions that fit the data in certain segments. The complex models also have many more assumptions. But in an exponential model, a small change causes the output to spin wildly out of control. What does Farr's model say about the current coronavirus? Now, remember, this is a model. But we should see a peak in early April, and the total death rate is within our bull case scenario shared on the last call. If the US was not increasing the number of tests, we would begin to see new cases drop over the next couple of days. Notice in the chart, the US begins to move out of the center of the data to an outlier over the last week. This is due to the ramp up in testing. Though frustrating, it's not it's not dreadful that we have more and better tests. This is ultimately a great improvement from just weeks ago, actually a week ago. We are now able to test and get results in a matter of hours. In addition, when we begin to separate the states, California is doing much better than New York. This continues to provide evidence in seasonality. We have seen some suggesting the US is less than 10 days behind Italy in deaths. We do not see this in the data. This chart is a little dated, but the trend has remained. Italy has the oldest population in Europe. They also have a higher tobacco use as well as many other factors. The US, especially when adjusting for population, is doing very well and has results comparable to South Korea and Japan. Spain, on the other hand, is on a death trajectory higher than Italy. Why would the government not see this information? They likely do. The incentives for government, specifically politicians, favor the abundance of caution approach mentioned earlier. Politicians will talk as if this is a worst case scenario. If it is that bad, they can say they did everything they could. And if it is not that bad, they can claim it wasn't worse because of what they did. From public choice theory, this is the dominating incentive for the government, but it is not always followed. Katrina is an example. Many listeners may have noticed President Trump changed his rhetoric about the virus when others started calling this his Katrina moment. The good news is new cases should peak within the next week in the US, though it could be hidden due to the increased testing. Remember, not all the infected are tested. followed by another week for the lag in deaths to peak. If FAR's model is correct, we should be on the downward slope by Easter. In addition, we have not seen a resurgence of new cases in China or South Korea. Italy likely peaked on the 21st. Iran is on a downward slope, but we have seen a jump in new cases again. They also requested aid and received it from Europe, which may influence the numbers of cases. Know that we are closely monitoring, to say the least. The financial pundits will likely shift to debates on the shape of the recovery, V, U, or L. We have differing views on the investment committee, which is good because it causes caution. My personal view is that it'll be a V-shaped recovery, and I am inclined to add risk to portfolios. Others are wanting additional confirmation. This week will be all about the stimulus bill making its way through Congress. Typical for these big ticket votes, there were scary headlines provided by investment banks and economists over the weekend to help give senators the proper motivation, including Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis President James Bullard warning of a 30% unemployment and a 50% decline in GDP. As a comparison, the unemployment during the Great Depression was 24.9%. He also said that there would be a rapid rise in the second half of the year, so it was not all doom and gloom. Now, call me a cynic, but my guess is the same institutions will call for restarting the economy once the stimulus bill is passed. Senator Mitch McConnell scheduled the initial vote on Monday, 15 minutes after the market opened. Don't play poker against this guy. Sundays, the futures were down significantly, and it looked as if the strategy would work. But the Federal Reserve announced unlimited quantitative easing, QE-finity, to include purchases of ETFs for the first time. The previous announcement was for $500 billion in treasuries and $200 billion in mortgage-backed securities. The market rallied and possibly stalled the bill. Now to the stimulus bill. Trump administration economist Larry Kudlow said the package would include $4 trillion in lending power for the Federal Reserve, as well as $2 trillion aid package currently being hammered out by Congress. Together, this is 1/4 of the US GDP. Quoting Kudlow, this package will be the single largest mainstream street assistance program in the history of the United States. Will they pass the bill? Likely. It's scheduled for Friday, but could be as early as today. If the market continues to appreciate, it may not be needed. We would consider this a positive. Yes, the stimulus bill would likely prove the V-shaped forecast correct, but it would also increase the deficit and therefore the country's debt burden. We believe that debt is the greatest risk we face, so Gatewood Wealth Solutions consider it a win to not add to U.S. debt if it is not needed. That being said, if the market begins to sell off, the bill will pass. And this has been a historic sell-off. However, we believe it would be a mistake to sell. We don't know the bottom. I wish we did. We have seen one-day rallies north of 10%. Think of what a rally would look like when COVID-19 is over. We believe it's prudent to buy into weakness because the upside potential is so high. Would we have liked to be more bearish prior to the market sell-off? Maybe. This is not a business cycle slowdown, so it did not show up in the data. We will not know the bottom until looking back many months from now, but the market is future-oriented. It will begin to rise well before this is over. The issue is how much uncertainty there is around the virus and the shutdown. But we are able to diagnose quicker, and we are able to treat with more effective medicine. And we are becoming more familiar with the true death rate and becoming more familiar with the timing of removing of the lockdown. Once again, any in government are already talking about ending the shutdown to include President Trump hoping to do so by Easter. This is not to say this is the correct response, but if our thesis is correct, that it's the shutdown, not the death rate, then the market should rally once that lockdown is removed or is known to be removed. It is not a surprise to begin having up days again, and we hope for more. Let's talk about fixed income. We have been saying for some time that bonds are tricky. We believe they are the most overvalued asset in the world, and now they can carry tremendous interest rate risk. Whether this shows up in the price or not, you are not getting paid a coupon. And how much price appreciation is there left to get? We have moved 50% of the bonds to high quality, short duration paper. This will resemble cash. If interest rates continue to go down and hit zero or negative, we are going to continue to lag our benchmark. If interest rates move up, the benchmark will sell off substantially. But these shorter duration bonds should hold their current value. And during this historic sell-off, many bonds have traded with equity-like volatility. The purpose of a bond in a portfolio is to lower volatility. We have decided to remove the volatility and lag the benchmark instead. It's just too risky. And some of this may sound like a broken record. We titled this Weeks When Decades Happen. This feels like an eternity. However, it will end, and the beginning of a new bull market will emerge.
Wow, thanks, Aaron. That was very, very enlightening. I do have a couple of questions that have come in from our audience, and one of them is, while we are on the front end of the curve and new infections are rising, they'll eventually start to flatten out, and then the shutdown or lockdown will be lifted from the federal government and all the local communities. What is the potential for a second wave, and what would that mean for the market in our portfolios?
Well, the potential of a second wave is certainly there, but if our thesis is this sell-off is more to do with the government shutdown or lockdown, it will all depend on how governments respond. And we're starting to see concern from politicians, President Trump, and many other people around the world that the shutdown is causing more problems than the virus. So we don't know how the governments will react. Is there a likeliness of a second wave? There's certainly a possibility. One of the reasons we're watching for new cases in different countries. And you would think that the market would have at least a knee-jerk reaction if those cases pop back up. But it really will all be dependent on whether the government wants to stop economic activity on the next round, or just say, this is just going to keep coming back and keep coming back. And we're just going to have to deal with it and probably try a different strategy, like isolating those that are in the highest risk factors from others. So at this point, especially if they're quickly trying to end the lockdown earlier and not wait for the cases to really make that turn, it tells you that they don't want to do this lockdown long. So, and that, we believe, is the real reason for the sell-off.
So it sounds like the length of the lockdown is really what's going to be the most important thing, at least for the next few weeks, because that's what's really causing the economic issues that we're having. So I would assume that the longer the lockdown, the longer the recovery will have to be, just because there's that much more damage. But
Yeah.
of course, you do have all this government stimulus, so maybe you can comment on how that would impact it.
Well, the impact of the stimulus on the market.
Yeah, well, in other words, that you've got this, the length of time will determine how far or deep that the economic damage goes. And now the government is trying to respond by providing all of this stimulus or relief for this disaster. How do you think that will roll out, depending upon how long the lockdown will go, and with all this government stimulus?
Well, the stimulus will be passed before the lockdown is removed. And right now, it's not going to have an effect, because they're actually, what the stimulus does is it moves demand forward, and that's economic activity forward. And if at the same time you're restricting that economic activity, it's not going to have much of an impact on the market. The market would probably still rally off of that, but I think a lot of it is just how long it's going to take, because if we're depleting our inventories that we've stored up and that has to be replaced, there's a lot of inventory and a lot of coordination that takes place to start this thing back up. And if you can't just go in there and turn the switch, you got to get inventory to the different things to get it moving, and no one else has that inventory. So the longer we're shut down, the longer it'll take the economy to recover. But the stimulus itself will be into capital markets pretty quickly.
Let me ask you this. I mean, what's kind of interesting to me is the fact that you had in 2009 the swine flu, where the first case occurred in April 12th of 2009. And when you look at the results from April 12th of 2009 to April 10th of 2010, there were 60 million Americans infected. There were 250,000 Americans hospitalized, and there were 12,500 deaths. And when I look at those numbers and compare them to what we're seeing now, those are much more substantial. So why is it that the reaction is so much greater now by the government than what it was back then?
Well, those numbers are now looking in the past. We don't know what the numbers in the future look like, though I think they will. They may actually be less than the swine flu. We haven't seen the end of this, but the difference between this and the swine flu, from what we can tell, is just the speed that it moves through the population. It's doubling at about or doubling every 2.4 days, which is very, very fast. And one of the ways that we've been thinking about this is, imagine if everyone that contracted the flu in any given year all caught the flu on a single day, and then 5 days later, 60,000 people show up and die in the emergency room because of the flu. That would be incredibly scary, especially if it was a flu strain that you've never seen before, and it's overwhelming the system by how fast it's moving. Now, this is not moving where everyone contracts it in a single day, but it is moving very, very fast, and that's what seems to be overwhelming it. We've actually seen a lot of evidence to suggest that this does not have a very high fatality rate. It just moves through society very, very quickly. So I think that's the big difference. Is it's new and it moves very quickly.
So you also mentioned the Katrina moment for Trump. And so what I remember was that when Katrina was being forecasted, eventually it came on to be worse than what people thought. And so the federal government was not really prepared well, and Bush was maligned for that for quite some time, for not being prepared. And I suppose that's the reason for the reaction today by government officials. The problem is that experts predict catastrophes, but they are not always that accurate. I mean, how many times have we seen a Category 5 hurricane forecasted, and then it ends up being a tropical storm, or a 20-inch snowfall end up being barely a dusting? So how do we see things going forward, and what will be the impact to economic modeling when you see these types of events coming up, and relative to potential government reaction?
You'd think more people are going to be doing their own modeling relative to using the abundance of caution models that the government is basing off of, and there's probably going to be some type of risk premium that you have to factor in on these, that the government will overreact. The markets tend to figure out how to price and bring stability to that price, so that we do lower volatility. There probably will also be some pain if this turns out to not be that catastrophic, and yet we made all these changes, and the shutdown or the the lockdown actually causes more problems than it solved. I think there was an op-ed in one of the newspapers where they were saying we're talking about deaths in the billions versus the millions. Well, that is certainly hyperbole, at least I hope so. But the point is what are we actually doing here? Because there's not a solution, and I think that's part of it. Is everyone wants a solution on what to do, and the reality is that this is just a trade-off, and we may see a slowdown in the number of cases because of the lockdown, and that may allow the hospitals to respond better and prevent some deaths from the virus. But what about an increase in suicide from the lockdown? People are isolated; they don't handle it well. In the previous call, we talked about the example of how hard confinement is, where a Chinese woman tried to climb out of her apartment building 10 stories up and fell to her death. You have the anxiety. We have likely a very, very big number of unemployment that's going to be posted. And that's very stressful for people. And we know stress and anxiety increase heart attacks, and that increases deaths. Hopefully there's a true sober assessment of what we're doing and have a better understanding of the trade-offs so that we don't just jump to the worst case scenario when we're planning. That doesn't mean that worst case scenarios can't happen. They certainly can. And the Katrina example is just demonstrating that, where everyone got tired of all the horrible Category 5 hurricanes coming, and it was going to overwhelm New Orleans. This wasn't new news. This was actually something that had been repeated time and time again for New Orleans, and it finally happened. And no one was taking it serious because of all the other assessments. So hopefully we figure out better ways of communicating and understanding the trade-offs and not just jumping to the worst case scenario.
I think that's a great point, and again highlights the strategy that we use in terms of risk management to make sure that we have certain cash targets so that we can make it through times like this, that we just have no way to time or know when it's going to happen, how long it's going to happen, or how hard the portfolios are going to be impacted. But we know that if people have cash, and if they have adequate cash, that's what really gives them the opportunity to make it through. So let's move to the point of unemployment, because we know we're at the front end of this thing, and we've already seen in the news large spikes in unemployment. In fact, I've heard of several cases where 90% of the employee workforce has been furloughed. So maybe you can comment on that and how we would see this unraveling the other way once we get past the crisis.
Well, there's been some debate in Congress on the wording of the stimulus legislation. So it could be that we see big numbers like 90% because of just how the bill was worded. Hopefully that's not the case. But companies that do not have revenue are going to need to cut employees. And the quicker that lockdown is removed, the quicker they can get back to work. The longer it goes on, the more likely it is that we'll have to really restructure. So in our opinion, it's really about the speed that the lockdown was removed, on how much damage it does. And if they were to come back and say next week we're all going back to work, well, we probably all would just go back to work. There wouldn't be a need to dust off resumes, see what industries are hiring, see what industries are researching where new flows are moving to, and then have to retrain people. And that's a slow process. We saw that in after 2008, 2009, on how long it took to to retrain all the people in the real estate industry and construction to find more different jobs that had gainful employment. I think the numbers are big. Absolutely. Actually, they're going to be historic based off just the consensus view. And we believe that this number is going to be very big. But if it's a limited amount of time, those rehires will come right back on. They're on a furlough. They're not laying people off, right? They're just furloughing them at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's the good news about this, so that it's important not to be alarmed at the number, because of what you're saying here is it's unlike 2008, where all the people in the real estate and construction industry, once they lost their job, there was no job. They had to be retrained for something else, where here people will just go right back to the jobs that they had. So we would expect that to have a much quicker, lead to a much quicker rebound as a result. Well, Aaron, thanks again for your time today. I want to thank all of our listeners. These are tough times for sure. And I also wanted to tell our listeners that we've had many of you ask if your relatives and friends could participate on the calls, because they have concerns too, and we would love to be a resource. So we do want to broaden our weekly calls to include client families and friends. So if you do have someone that could benefit from this call, this information, please let us know, and we will add them to the listener list. So while we at GWS are optimistic about the future, we do acknowledge that things may become weary and even scary, because if we peak around Easter, that's still a long ways away from an emotional standpoint, because we're just here at the front end of the curve. And as you were mentioning, Aaron, it accelerates essentially, because you're doubling every 2.4 days. Holy cow. So weeks certainly may feel like months, but 1 year from now, we are absolutely confident. I mean, imagine that we're 1 year from today. I'm sure, positive, that we are going to be in a much different situation than where we are now. We'll be much improved, and we will look back on this and remember it as an historic event, but not something that crushed us. So thanks again. If you have any questions to our listeners, call your lead advisors, your associate lead advisors. We are here for you. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, John.